Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for joining us today from various parts of the country. We hope all of you are safe at home as we get through this pandemic. With that, I would like to welcome each of you to this webinar on how to manage employee costs during COVID-19 pandemic without actually saying goodbye. Brought to you by Vakilsearch, India's leading online legal services provider for SMEs and individuals. My name is Renoy George, and I'll be your host and the moderator for this webinar, joining you from my home in Kerala. Our speaker for today is Vakilsearch's Head of Human Resources, Miss Michele Sereno, joining us from her home in Chennai. Hello, Michelle. Good to have you here. Hope you're doing well.
Hi, Renoy. A very good evening to all of you. And thank you for
Hi.
having me on this webinar.
Sure, it's our pleasure. We hope to have a good discussion today, and we're
Absolutely.
very glad to have you here. Yes.
Thank
So
you.
for our attendees, a little yes, yeah. So for our attendees, a little bit of a background on Michelle. She's an MBA and gold medalist from Mumbai with 15 years of experience. Michelle is an operations, human capital, and communication specialist. She has been conferred with 101 Top HR Tech Minds Award 2019 at a global level by HR Tech, the Future of World at Work, World HRD Congress, in association with ET Now, and also been conferred with one Woman Leadership Award at the Tamil Nadu Brand Leadership Awards 2019 and also at the Future Women Leader Summit. Currently, Michelle is spearheading the Human Resources Foundation at a dynamic, fast-growing legal tech firm, Vakilsearch. Yes, Michelle.
Thank you, Renoy, for the introduction.
Happy to. So it's such an honor to have you here. So I believe you have a few thoughts about the topic in hand.
Yes, absolutely, Renoy. So thank you all for coming in today. So we can discuss this important topic that how to manage employees' cost during COVID-19 pandemic without actually saying goodbye. So while health and safety of each one of us and our loved ones has taken top priority during this time, we also have a lot of dependencies on the healthy functioning of the economy and businesses. And I'm glad that you all are here today to discuss the same. So, COVID 19 widespread today has transformed the world's hustle into varying degrees of uncertainty. Where I see ourselves is that we are in a world that's both united as well as divided during this pandemic. United in the sense that we're all adjusting to a new normal and different challenges and some opportunities as well that are arising with a different way of living and working. And where I see that we are divided is where our nations fall in the crisis bell curve and how we are all responding to this situation. So while countries across globally, organizations, they're continuing to understand and navigate through this pandemic of such immense scale. It's certainly undeniable that we're all staring at something much more permanent that's making structural changes to the way that we're all been living, working, and playing. So I see this fundamentally different from recessions that we've really seen in the past. In fact, some experts have been projecting this as one of the worst recessions that the world has ever seen. So this definitely would have a varied impact on businesses, depending on the sector, depending on the financial muscle and management decisions of the company. In fact, during this time, some businesses may even close down and some will struggle and some will come out even as a winner. So I see it as a time right now as to engage and not to disengage. And being an HR leader myself, we must respond quickly and comprehensively, considering both the immediate, the short term, and the long term consequences. So HR's role is going to be very crucial and strategic to ensure business sustainability as well as to ensure productivity and cost optimization. In fact, in a recent survey that I came across, there were about almost 7 out of 10 HR leaders who were citing crisis management or business continuity planning as their top challenge during COVID-19 outbreak. And close behind on this list of priorities was managing flexible work arrangements and employee communications. And employee communications during this time has really been thrusted into the spotlight because it's not just communicating, but it's how effectively you're going to communicate during this time. So hence every step and every measure that is taken from the HR perspective should be carefully thought of and should be analyzed through the prism of an employee, cost benefit, as well as the legal framework. Now, as the impact of this pandemic really spreads, HR leaders, like all functional leaders, are facing tremendous amount of pressure to cut costs. But it's going to be very critical to avoid a knee-jerk response, as people are our key and they're the greatest resource to every organization. So the way we're going to manage our cost decisions now is really going to determine how well we will sustain performance during this crisis and how we're going to emerge through it and pass through it. So I see it as the role of HR that has to be redefined right from recruitments and appraisals to new working models, performance-centric compensation restructuring, managing cost optimization and reduction exercises, but very importantly, without damaging the employer brand. So if the organizations today, if any of your organizations are witnessing a slowdown or are expecting a slowdown in the coming months, some possible actions to be taken from the employment side, cost side, to help manage the situation could range from simple cost control to severe cuts. So I have a brief slide here that I would like to show all of you. Vishal, if you could please help me with this slide. Yes, I think all of you could see the slide right now. So here, how I have defined this as one of the first steps to manage employment cost is freezing new hires and key critical hiring. What I mean here is go back to your drawing board, go back to your organization structure, revisit all your open positions and freeze all non-critical hires. Identify your key critical open positions and have a very focused, concentrated approach with these critical positions. Because it could be these critical positions that will help drive and sustain the business during the long run. The next that I have defined here is benefits and allowances management. Now, we all have different benefit schemes and allowance schemes in our organizations. So I would urge you all to go back and review each of your benefit schemes and hold on to your investments in non-core benefits. Non-core benefits such as traveling, ticketing, scholarships, etc. maybe if you do provide. Allowance schemes where you could really highlight areas for possible saving measures. For example, a very simple example that I could share here is, now we're all doing a work from home. In such a scenario, if you do have a transportation allowance, you can drop that for now till normal conditions, work conditions are restored. So go back and review your benefits and allowances scheme. The next that I have defined here is appraisals, promotions, and salary increase, performance pay bonuses. Now, most of the organizations follow a financial appraisal cycle. So if you, a financial year appraisal cycle. So if you do have an appraisal cycle that's not yet conducted, you could look at postponing this and deferring the salary increases and promotions. Also, maybe when it comes to your performance pay bonuses, you could possibly look at holding on or deferring these for some time, or maybe even depending on the business impact, maybe canceling some of your performance pay and bonuses. But yes, do keep in mind, except for these statutory bonuses which are mandated by law. The next, as part of managing employment cost, would be salary cuts. So if you're introducing salary cuts, salary reduction, I would suggest do not go with a blanket percentage cut across all bands. Review each of the different bands that you have in the organization and define percentage cuts across those bands. But make sure that this entire process is transparent to your organization and various stakeholders that are involved. And finally, that I've defined here is right sizing, redeployment, retrenchment management. When I say right sizing, I've not called it as downsizing. I'm saying right sizing because it's very important that we structure our workforce to align our short-term business needs with a long-term value. So it's about talking about how cross-functional teams and creating those cross-functional teams, creating a mix of both permanent and temporary workers, and maximizing the effectiveness of both your current and your future workforce in light of all these different changes. So also variable cost in terms of your payroll cost. For example, if you do have contractors, if you've got consultants, look at focusing and reducing and eliminating these as part of your right sizing measure. Also, most of us as a performance management system in our different organizations, we have something that's called as a performance improvement plan. So identify those who are already on a performance improvement plan and are showing no improvements for immediate exits. Next step is identify the low performers and the non-performers for voluntary separation rather than termination. And in this emerging scenario, this may unfortunately accelerate. If you do have furlough leaves, you may want to resort to furlough leaves, where companies would inform employees to go on mandatory leave without pay. However, they do not retrench them. So employees then can be brought back to your payroll at a later date based on business viability. Some businesses may also want to close their non-core, non-performing divisions after the lockdown, post evaluating the impact of this pandemic. So these were some of the action steps that I could really look at and suggest to all of you in terms as to how you could look at managing employment cost. So while we do have to battle all these cost pressures to survive, we should definitely not ignore investing in coaching and developing our best high potential talent so that they are better prepared to succeed in this new normal. The way I see it is the lockdown may be lifted within a few weeks, but definitely there's no denying that we've all now entered an uncharted paradigm, new paradigm, where surviving against all these odds has now become the new norm. And this unprecedented crisis right now is testing not just professional, but I'm sure you would all agree with me, personal relationships as well across the world. So therefore, it's going to be the responsibility of each and every member of an organization to put in their utmost efforts and maintain smooth business relations. Now, while certain concerns may initially slow down progress, as the overall impact of the outbreak is going to overshadow the operations for years to come. I would say steady and positive communication will help maintain everyone's employee morale and keep all these employee relations intact as the world moves through this challenge. So, these are some of my thoughts that I would really like to share on the topic. Over to you, Renoy, for any further questions that you or any of our viewers would really have on the topic, Renoy.
Def definitely. I think the word for the day should be right sizing. It's a very positive outlook of things, because mostly when companies are faced with challenges, there are other words people think of as solutions to the problem. But a positive outlook of things is the right way to go. And we shouldn't lose humanity in the when we
True.
look after our businesses. So yeah, so yes, as you mentioned, there are a few questions. So people, when they registered, they have sent in a few questions as well. So I'll go through them,
Okay,
and you can help us out with the answers.
sure.
So so the first question is related to the nature of the pandemic. That is, there is no manual or handbook one can refer to, because something of this magnitude has not happened before. I think you mentioned that in your opening statement as well. So how then do you draw up a plan, and what is the number one priority that you focus on?
True, Renoy. There is no manual or handbook. And, as I did mention, that experts are projecting this as one of the worst recessions that the world has really ever seen. So we will
Yeah.
have to relook at our business plans that we had envisaged prior to COVID-19 and work out
Yeah.
alternative plans to combat this upcoming downturn, which is going to be the key. However, it's not going to be an easy challenge to really draw up a plan, as we all don't know really what the final impact is going to be, or when the situation is going to really resolve, or when are we really going to get ahead of the curve. But one fortunate aspect of the era that we already live in at this point of time is the sophistication of our digital world, where we have this broad array of technology, software, devices that really help us to operate, to plan, and respond to this kind of a crisis. So the changes that we are experiencing now are in this way definitely a preparation for the future. How I see it is distributed work, virtual engagement environments, enhanced data and analytics, AI and machine learning. Now, these were already available to us, and we were already using these in varying degrees. But now we definitely have the opportunity to employ them more fully. And this is going to really help us to deal with the strangeness of these days. On the other hand, I also see it as emotional challenges that are quite profound as the practical ones, and where we are all really at this point of time relearning the value of creativity, adaptability, and fluidity. We are finding our way past unimaginable challenges, and we are trying to rely really on resourcefulness of our teams. So there's really no one right way, only a mix of ever evolving possibilities and our conviction to create a better future when so much is still so unknown. I'm sure, Renoy, this crisis and is going to pass. And what comes up next is on us. How the goal that we are going to really propel towards driving the vision of tomorrow. So the one priority for me would be, I would say, moving digitally, which is getting a real push at this point of time, as most companies have opted to work remotely, and employees are now online and working from home, just like what we are doing right now. And we're
That's
all
right.
today working. So it's like we're all working from home today. And while this trend was already in motion, it has definitely
Yeah.
now hit the fast forward button and basically
Yeah.
preparing all of us for a different normal. So that's how I see it,
Okay.
Renoy.
All right. That's good. So let's move on to the next one. Uh,
Sure.
so within Okay, so like you said, we're all working from home right now. We are depending on digital technology. But
Absolutely.
how do you arrive at decisions and disseminate information within the organization? That is from decision makers to senior managers, and then finally to the rest of employees.
Interesting, Ranoy, because decisions are key. And I would say not just during this pandemic, but decisions are key even prior to this pandemic, right? And it has to be taken in consensus with all major key stakeholders and your senior management. And how I see dissemination of information during this time is going to be through effective communication, right from
Okay.
your decision, right from your decision makers to your senior managers to each and every member of the organization. So how you communicate and how effectively you communicate is really going to be the key.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Another part of decisions is having to make difficult choices. Is there a process involved in how to execute those hard decisions or choices?
Yes, hard decisions, absolutely. In fact, HR's role in a crisis like this is even more critical because the stress of a crisis magnifies your action and it tends to create a lot of lingering memories. So one needs to carefully navigate and think through before these hard decisions are really taken. For example, few organizations they cut deep during the first time. So they then need to revisit cost cuts. And that could create a very destructive and unproductive cycle of uncertainty. And in this process, efforts are lost as well as you have loss of productivity. So hence cutting or reducing hard enough the first time and only doing it once, especially when it comes to workforce decisions. I think
Yeah.
these cycles of ongoing reductions can be quite destructive as employees are the heart of an organization. So it's really important to navigate individual needs with organization requirements to have this right balance of what is right for both the employee as well as the organization.
Okay. So as we move on, I mean, I think you mentioned this right in the beginning about adapting to changes, whether it's including digital technology or whether it's working from home or whether it's collaborating to make decisions and choices. So as we move forward in the future, at least, will organizations be required to have contingencies in place? I'm talking about not just human resources, but there is financial aspects to a business, operational aspects. So how do you think such contingencies are going to affect the HR or company policies?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, you will need to have contingencies in place, and remote work that I see it is going to be like a permanent feature for more organizations. In fact,
Yeah.
you have some of the business conglomerates declaring this in the media already that that is going to be the new normal for them. So HR needs to start now collaborating very closely with the finance, IT, and other departments to develop and implement new rules and have contingencies in place. In fact, some of the questions that would need to be addressed during this time from the HR point of view is going to be how will you monitor and enforce attendance? How will managers translate existing work rules, meeting schedules, and communication strategies? How must your job descriptions change to accommodate part time or full time remote work? Who will pay for remote workers' connectivity? And any such required equipments like printers, monitors, headsets, etc. How will you recover them if someone quits or is let go? So all HR functions would need to adapt, for example, talent acquisition and development, discipline, benefits, and compensation. all of these will introduce their own challenges in a remote work environment. And in the meantime, HR's role is going to be monitoring and maintaining morale, which is going to become even more crucial. So it's a good idea to create, a formal process for checking in with remote employees to ask how they're dealing with added stress. And why I say added stress during this time is I'm sure we're all facing this in some form or the other. We earlier used to say we're working in the comfort, we are in the comfort of our home. But now it is, you'd almost be saying we are in the comfort of our offices, because you might be in the midst of a conference call and you would have the bell ringing. Or if you have a little one at home, you would have the little one just coming up to you and saying, Mom, Dad, I really need this help, or the little one is crying. So this added stress to it, definitely. And in fact, just on Mother's Day, just to share, I saw this advertisement of HP which said work from home, and they defined it for mothers as work from home, as work for home, a combination of both. So, it's not just mothers, but it's also fathers having to go through while you're doing a work from home with added stress, and how you're really going to attend to these circumstances during this crisis. And how are you really going to be on top of this, of to addressing these issues till things come back and return to this new normal. So it's important from the HR perspective that the HR team members talk to individuals and work on finding different solutions, because all of these challenges are genuine. So ask them, are they really being in touch with their colleagues, with their managers? Do they need anything to help stay productive? And I'm sure during the coming weeks, it's also going to become very clear what jobs can be done effectively on site, what jobs cannot be done effectively off site. So that's where we will require to start working on contingency plans and work out policies for those as well.
All right. So moving on, if let's say right now we are in the lockdown phase, there are relaxations in place, but if let's say this lockdown continues, or this if the situation goes on, what would you advise companies that may have to lay off their employees?
Yes,
Because
Renoy.
it's not just about apart from the lockdown phase also, there is a phase where the economy has to recover, because I think we are at a stage where we are not really feeling the after effects of this, but we will eventually after a few months. So during that stage, when we are feeling those effects, or when the economy is taking time to recover, if we have to lay off some employees, how what would you advise companies going forward?
Uh, yes, while it is going to be emotionally challenging for everyone, I'm sure these are really difficult decisions for stakeholders, as no one really would want to let go of your employees during such times. But yes, balance is going to be important to maintain the health of an organization, as you need to survive before you succeed. So any workforce optimization initiative would require HR teams and may require HR teams to execute layoffs for service units or employees that are unable to achieve your strategic business priorities. During this time, organizations should follow a systematic management approach to the layoff process. And I would say communicate consistently with the workforce and drive employee engagement. So that's where I would, relate to my slide presentation, Renoy, to answer your question better. When we're looking at these layoffs, we should keep in mind right sizing and identification of low performers, non-performers, and non-core, non-performing divisions.
Yeah. So just to follow up on that, what would you say is the best approach in there? Because in some cases you can give them a notice period or a period to improve performance. In some cases, there's a direct decision or an immediate decision made where the immediately the employee is let go. So which would be a better process?
See, if the employee is already on a performance improvement plan, I would say, and if you are looking and you have to resort to layoffs, then I think that
Yeah.
would have to be an immediate exit, because you cannot really
Okay.
continue with a non-performing employee, especially during these trial times. While I do
Okay.
understand it's going to be a hard decision, but considering that you did give the employee already an opportunity to perform, and he or she has not done his best during this time. So I would say it should be an immediate exit during that point of time. So it's actually a balance and a weighing of a lot of things during this time, because these are very sensitive decisions that have to be taken. At the same time, seeing how the organization is going to take these decisions, to see how they're going to really survive in this long run, because that's something that is so unpredictable during this time of this crisis specifically.
All right. So we'll go into a little more lighter subject. So
Yes.
what happened over there? Yeah. So every month we run a poll on our Facebook page. We ask a question to our Facebook followers, and we like to know
Okay.
what their opinion is. So I'm going to ask the same question to you. So just
Okay.
based on your experience. So a little more.
Sure.
So I'll give you the answer also based on the votes that we received. But first, like
Okay.
to get your answer as well. So
Okay. Good to
initially
know.
during the yeah, so during the initial stages of the lockdown, there was a talk where they were saying that we need to flatten the curve. That is reduce the number of new cases that were coming up.
Okay.
So from there they went into how long will it take for the economy to recover. So since we're talking about the economy, I like to go into this question as well. So there is a
Okay.
V-shaped curve, there is a
Right.
W-shaped curve, there's a U-shaped curve, and L-shaped curve. Now, with respect to
Mm-hmm.
each curve, I'll just go into the recovery time. So the V-shaped curve talks about recovery in 2 to 6 months. The W-shaped curve talks about recovery with interventions, which can go take up to 3 to 9 months. And then the U-shaped curve, the recovery period goes to from 4 to 12 months, but there's no recession. And then finally the L-shaped curve, recovery after a year, that is over a year, and then we might have to face a little bit of recession as well. So those are the
Mm.
options. Yeah.
Okay. Talking
So
about the economy and the different curves. Uh, in fact, recently, Renoy, I had read one of KPMG's latest reports, analysis reports, which was on the GDP growth rates. So basically,
yeah.
there they have very clearly spoken that the global economy is in a very precarious place, to handle these kind of shocks. Now, COVID-19 is very unique in the sense
Hmm.
that we're having a supply, we're having a demand, and a market shock. And the global economy already was in a precarious place in 2019, and the risk of global recession in 2020 is extremely high, as nations shut down economic activities to limit the spread of COVID-19. So production is curtailed around the world, and many firms, in fact, will not really have the required inputs. And there's going to be a severe demand shock that is underway, across discretionary spend categories that we see. So we've never really been forced to hide into our homes, right? We're seeing this
Yeah.
coast to
Yeah.
coast and country to country to avoid infecting others and being infected ourselves. So the protocols of protection are in themselves exacting and a very enormous toll that I see, where jobs are lost and plans are disrupted. You have futures put on hold for so many. So in sum, the story is really a crisis with an uncertain ending, introducing new challenges each day. So I would say very difficult to predict at this point of time on what the recovery curve could really look like post the lockdown. But
Yeah.
maybe an L-shaped curve, is maybe what I see, because it would take some time. But I just hope
Okay.
that the damage would be minimal during this time. That's my sincere hope and prayer.
Sure, sure. So just to give more emphasis, L-shaped curve talks about recovery after years and might have to deal with a little bit of recession. So going
Right.
back to our Facebook users, everyone voted for a W-shaped curve.
WFA.
Recovery with a little bit of intervention, but recovery will be possible in about 3 to 9 months. So I think everyone likes to remain positive. That's one side of things when we look at it.
Okay.
So there is the
Absolutely.
realistic side of it based on all our experience, and then there are people who want to remain as positive as possible. I mean, I definitely am one of those people who want to say W, although L is definitely a
Absolutely, Renoy,
possibility.
because uh,
Yeah,
everyone would just want this. I think all of us right now are just in our homes and just wanting to move out and wondering when the situation is going to get back to normal. So I'm sure we're all just waiting for, things to just settle back
yeah,
to normal. And that's what we're all
yeah, yeah.
hoping for. So, it's just in the hope that everything really works out to the best interest of, organizations as well as individuals for each of us right now.
Right, right. No, because it's interesting what you mentioned about, we never having to go and basically hide in our homes in that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Because, as since we're managing the social media pages, we regularly come across different memes and because things have changed. When the lockdown came into place, suddenly there's been a change in terms of what's being posted and what's not being posted also. The kind of content that has come out there in terms of how to manage lockdown and situations like that. So, hopefully we can come out of it. We can come out a bit stronger, a bit more wiser. So with that, yeah, with that, I'll move on to the next question, and this is to do with social
Yeah.
distancing. Uh,
Okay.
so it's like we discussed, it's going to take some time before we completely eradicate this virus. Hence,
Absolutely.
as per the latest orders from the government, officers are expected to implement social distancing measures to safeguard the health and well-being of employees. And even offices who are allowed to open, they are supposed to function at minimum capacity.
Right.
So in that case also, how do we drop such plans to implement these social distancing measures? For example, maybe in a room there might have been earlier 10 employees. Now we can't probably risk having 10 people in the room. So we may have to cut down to 3 or 4 in a room. So how do we go about setting up such plans?
Yes, definitely. It will take some time, and we will need to have an action plan, Renoy, here. So, I would say, some immediate steps as part of this action plan is where you implement thermal checks, where organizations start implementing this and educating employees. About having, if you have any flu symptoms, not to come to work and go to the hospital, or asking employees if you have anyone in your direct contacts who are suffering from flu symptoms not to come to work till such case is not proven corona. And creating awareness about hygiene precautions and practices that every employee should take while using organization facilities, especially those employees who are going to be on the front line, customer interfacing. Provide them with mask, eye protection, gloves, and where you have multi-employee workstations, ensure employees to begin with, when don't get your complete workforce in, but have a 6 feet distancing rule that has been asked also by the government as well there, and ensure that these workstations should be cleansed every time a shift ends or employees finish work. Place hygiene liquids across the organization. You could also possibly look at replacing touch interface tools with other non-touch tools, such as your fingerprint access. Encourage water hydration. You could also look at reducing paper and use more of soft copies and emails, reducing your meetings to the maximum and replacing it with video conferencing and calls. Now, while all of these are physical action points, I'm sure uncertainty and fear will linger in people's minds. And it should be a conscious effort for us to be approachable and lend that emotional support to team members. And even the high flying ones, I would like to mention here, not just everyone, paying importance to the high flying ones as well. And fostering these positive communication channels across levels and encouraging other team leads as well as to do the same. So that's how I would
Right.
suggest some of these as the action points, Renoy.
Right. Now, because I remember before we went into lockdown, when we were coming to office, I think we quickly implemented some safety measures. Because we had a
Correct.
fingerprint scanner at the office. We took away the fingerprint scanner, and everyone's instructed to use the card and scan the
Correct.
card and then walk in. And there were hand sanitizers placed in every corner of the office. So we implemented those safety measures at the beginning.
Right.
I remember that. So it was really fast also, because I remember there was that news report we were all reading. We were at that point, none of us were taking it that seriously, wherein we thought we would be in this situation 2 or 3 months down the line, we'll be in our homes. So I remember that, I read this that evening. The next day morning when I came to office, suddenly there was a note out that don't use the fingerprint scanner, use the card. And then I stepped into the office, there was the hand sanitizer. So I was really happy and proud with the way these measures were implemented within the office. So yes, credit to you for that. And
Thank you, Renoy.
so I guess, yeah. So how did you go about it? I mean, is it something that you read on the news and you said, okay, so we should implement these immediately, these measures?
Uh, yes, Renoy. In fact, as for me, in fact, during this time personally, as part of this lockdown period and how aggressively, we've had to really move during this time has been really tested. And we were actually while we were reading up different news that was really coming up with regards to how COVID-19 spread has been across, China and, how it has been really spreading across, we were keeping ourselves prepped up for that. In fact, what we also did as part of the organization, where we were really foreseeing something like a work from home coming in, where we've never had a work from home really as such, for team members in the organization. So we went about even implementing some test runs there. So yes, we did.
Okay.
It was with a lot of awareness through the news, through the media, that we had to keep ourselves really agile and adapt ourselves to see how we could really move quickly during this time. And that's how I think we could really transition ourselves also quickly to this work from home.
Yeah, I guess along with making a plan, I mean, creating these plans, it's important to be aware and be conscious enough to implement these changes and take
Absolutely.
action and lead from the front. Yeah.
Right.
So with that, let's go into the another question. So I think this is one of the last questions we're going into. That is, what are your learnings throughout this lockdown period and before that, as well as an HR lead? I mean, you shared some of your thoughts, you shared
Right.
some of your action plans as well. But I think this is an overall learning curve, at least after this, because I know I definitely have learned a few things staying home all this while. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. In fact, I think it has been a learning curve for most of us across, because we've never really had to do, work from home for such long, extensive periods as such. And I think for me, the most important thing that I've learned is to aggressively find the most effective way to be able to allocate your task within and outside your function, and how you're going to really get immediate results. Like the instance that I was just sharing with you, Renoy, where we worked very closely with the IT, finance, the admin, and the HR teams to become a remote workforce in just about 2 to 3 days' time. For about 400
yeah,
employees, and finding the most efficient communication challenge. So I would
Yeah.
say focusing on real-time action has been one of the most important HR capabilities for me personally that has been tested during this time. And I would just urge all of you to really build a crisis response muscle and implement real-time data collection and communication programs even when things are fine.
Okay. Sure. Thank you for that. So during our discussion, there are a few questions have come in. I'll try
Okay.
to address them as much as I can. We are a little short on time right now, so I'll address them as quickly as I can.
Sure.
So I'll just mention their names first. Mr. Mithun Abraham from Chennai, he's working in Joseph Hospitals. Along with
Okay.
that, Mr. Bikash Agrawal in Pune, he's working at Physics Laboratory India Private Limited. So they both ask questions that are quite similar. So it's about
Okay.
how paying salary to employees while in lockdown. Now, some of us, like you and I have been discussing about working from home. So when we're working from home, work is still being done. Some certain cases, I believe the employees, when they are during this lockdown period, they don't necessarily have a job where they can work from home. They have to physically be present at locations. So their question over here is related to how the salary is played. I mean, how can they pay the salary, or the implication of not paying or paying salary during this lockdown period?
Right. In fact, the MHA order, it actually states that all employers, be it in the industry or in the shops and commercial establishments, they shall make
Hmm.
payment of wages of their workers at their workplaces on the due date without any deductions for the period their establishments are under closure during the lockdown. But while it
Yeah.
is clear that the same applies to workers who are drawing wages at their workplace, it also states that this is applicable only to those establishments that are closed during the lockdown. So, since the MHA order does not really define clearly who is the worker, it's important to place the reliance of these various legislations that define the term worker and also those legislations that define the term wages and workers to whom wages really need to be paid to arrive at the correct interpretation of this MHA order. So you have states like Delhi, Telangana, and Haryana that have issued directions that are binding and mandatory in nature. However, you have
Yeah.
other states like Maharashtra and Karnataka. They've refrained from mandating the same and releasing issuances that are very advisory in nature. So I would say any questions with regards to your wages and retrenchment will really have to be state specific. But all I can say is with cash reserves dwindling at this point of time and no stimulus package in sight, businesses definitely will need to have some respite to be able to survive the economic aftermath of COVID-19.
Okay. Okay. One more question from Mr. Ashish Kedia, Mumbai, from AV Kedia Associates. So, yeah. So his question is regarding again, it's a salary payment related question, but his question is related to labor law issues. So if there is a delay in paying salaries, will he have to face labor law issues as a result? Probably legal issues. That's what we're talking about.
I think I would go back to the same definition that I stated now, Renoy, in terms of the correct interpretation of the MHA order. So it really depends as to how we see ourselves in terms of, you know, being clear as to who are the workers who are drawing wages at their workplaces. So really defining who the worker is, what the wages are, and so on. So it will really depend again the same way that I stated that it will be state specific and really reviewing the correct interpretation of the MHA order, whether you can delay or cannot delay, depending and keeping these labor law issues in mind.
Okay. Okay. Moving on, there is Amit Kumar from Delhi. He is working hospitality services. and even Alicia Chennai, DMC's of Software Services Private Limited. So it's about again how can we manage salary of all staff and retain them along with cost management now.
Right. So I think talking about cost management to answer Amit and Ivan's question here, I think Alicia's question, if I've got the name right, to answer these two questions, it would really be looking into the points that I had highlighted at the beginning of the webinar, really, Renoy, which is the a quick sum of it, how you would be able to manage your cost is freezing new hires and focusing on key critical hiring, revisiting your benefits and allowance schemes, and looking at deferring your appraisals, salary cuts, and focus on right sizing, redeployment, and retrenchment management.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hope that answers. Let me just look if there's more. All right, we got one more question. Can we terminate the employees who are not required to be paid wages as per the MHA order? While terminating such employees, what are the steps or safeguards an employee may consider?
Okay. So yes, you can. However, you would need to ensure that you carry out such terminations in adherence to the employment contracts that have been executed earlier and issue a carefully drafted termination letter to the employee where also you have appropriate documentation should such a
Okay.
termination possibly end up in court on a later date. So else the
Okay.
employee may register a complaint with the government and they could look at seeking relief against the action of the employer, keeping this pandemic situation in mind. And the government could adopt a sympathetic view in favor of the employee. In fact, even the labor
Okay.
department could even overstep its jurisdiction here and could eventually direct the employer to pay wages to the employee on compassionate grounds. So in such
Yeah.
situations, the employer should pay the employee his dues under protest, but with a disclaimer stating that the employer's right to recover the same after the epidemic ends.
All right. Right. Additionally, there are a few more questions coming in. So let me just go through them. So we have a address from the Prime Minister today at 8 p.m. So we'll get to know more. But as of right now, the lockdown ends on 17th May 2020. So if an office is planning to restart or office by 18th May, and they've contacted their employees and told them to arrange transportation, will this create a problem for the company? That because they're asking people to come, because we don't know the situation yet, but let's assume that lockdown ends on 17th and 18th, they're asking people to come and work in the office. They've asked people to join the organization. So will this create problem for the company?
See here, it's going to be the company decision, I would say, as to how you're looking at bringing your employees back into the organization. Because even how I see it after 18th May, I don't see your 100% workforce really coming back to office. So it would
Yeah.
have to be a decision that is taken with your key stakeholders and management to review which of those jobs really are key critical that cannot be done off-site and would need to
Yeah.
be done on-site. So looking at how you could really identify those positions, those employees, also making sure that those employees are not in the red alert zones. That's also going to be something that's going to be important to be looked at, and seeing how you're
Yeah.
looking at bringing in those employees back to the organization. So it's going to be a joint and a decision that has to be very carefully navigated through and thought through. But yes, organizations will have to look at resorting. It's not going to be that, unless you can really manage, because I do know of some IT organizations that are taking decisions despite the lockdown that might get called off after say 17th of May. They're already
Hmm.
planned themselves for not kickstarting office operations until few months. but that's because they
Oh,
can resort to it. But there are some
okay.
organizations that cannot resort to it, right? Because
Right.
you need your employees to be available in office to execute certain tasks and for things, and business has to continue, right? To look at viability and sustainability of the business. So it has to be a conscious decision and a decision really thought of, navigated well during this time, Renoy.
Okay. So I guess in this case, it's really a call for HR policies. Like in this case, you probably have to go back to your HR policies or not. If you have to create a few policies in place and then execute certain decisions according to those policies.
Absolutely. Like I had also mentioned earlier, it's like along with your contingency plans, you will have to work out some set of new HR policies, considering you're going to have work from home and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Another question that has come in is during this period, uh, how do you handle maternity benefits or employees EPFO, Provident Fund options?
Right. So, maternity benefits, the same thing gets applied right now because that is as per your government rules and regulations, your Maternity Benefit Acts. So, you'll have to have that in the same way applicable. In terms of your the PF and the other important aspects, as I had mentioned earlier, your statutory benefits cannot be you cannot stop your statutory benefits at this point of time. Things may be
Hmm.
delayed in certain organizations, and that's where relaxations have been given even by the government as to in terms of how your PF, ESI, and other payments can be done from the organization's side, because they are giving those that relaxation time to an organization considering the current pandemic crisis. While you cannot ignore those, and those only can be pushed ahead for some time in light of this scenario, but statutory benefits will have to be applied mandatory.
All right. So the last question is about it's related to sales executives. So during this time, I believe sales, people are at home, so you can't really go out there and you can't really make those big sales happen. So how in those cases the salary is managed as well as variable pay structure? Because and earlier I came across a since we are in the marketing business, we sometimes come across articles during this time where people are saying, you have to learn new skills. So there is social selling, there is selling online sales options, things like that. So during this time, what do you look at when you're planning out the salary structure or the variable structure for sales related employees?
See, the structures right now have already been planned in most of the organizations because no one really expected, a scenario like this. So, be it your sales staff or your non-sales staff, right? But the only thing is how you would have to really evaluate it now in terms of seeing whether this particular sales force is able to make these sales via calls, and where you're not able to really personally go and meet each other, do these video online presentations and try to make that sale. Redefine, and revisit the way your incentive structures work for them, your variable components work for them, to make it a little more exciting that they are driven to do it even while at home. And in cases where
Yeah.
absolutely, you're not able to make a sale, and it is affecting your business, where you are not able to drive that particular division or drive that particular function sub function in your team. Maybe one of the measures that I had mentioned earlier as part of the webinar is maybe possibly resorting to furlough leaves, where till such time things get back to normal and they're really able to travel and meet
Hmm.
clients, resorting to furlough leave. So you're not retrenching them, but you're keeping them off from the payroll for some point of time and then bringing them back on rolls, because they would be key employees for that particular division and you would not want to let them go at this point of time. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be quite difficult because you're talking about furlough leave, and not having them as part of your payroll cost. So but these difficult and hard decisions will have to be taken, Renoy, from the organization side as well. It's going to be a balance of both, really.
Okay. I guess people have to pick up new skills also to survive, because
Absolutely.
like you mentioned initially, we have to adapt. That's the only way we can grow, we can develop. So yeah. So with that we
Adaptability,
come to the
fluidity, and creativity. Renoy, I would say
yes,
adaptability, fluidity, and creativity. Three aspects of it is during this time is what's going to really drive each of us to be able to achieve what we want to during this time.
sure. Okay. So with that we come to the end of this webinar, and Michelle, I'd like to thank you for your time and all for your answers. I think all our attendees have found it useful. So would you like to conclude?
Thank you so much, Renoy, and it has been a pleasure, connecting with all those who have joined in today on this webinar. And thank you all so much for being there. All I'd like to say is stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Good night. Thank you all to our viewers for watching and joining in. We wish you all a very good evening. If you like, for more updates, you can follow us on our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. We look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Get 300 plus services. Chat and email with our team directly. Get stunning discounts and rewards. Only on Vakilsearch app. Download now.